Okay.
I like it. But you have to sit down to get used to it.
Why don't we face the wall then?
Oh,
On this side.
yeah, that's true.
Call the meeting to order at 09:01. Meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Susie and John, do you want to come up and sit at the table with us?
Sure.
And we'll talk
Sure.
about your,
You sign switch to Rockford.
Great. Good. You're busy, huh? Oh, it's 2 days.
Lately.
Last couple of weeks.
All right.
So is that the one on page 5, Joyce? So it's basically, is it really one line? Everything is packed into one line?
Yes, that is correct.
So in here, we have 4,950. Looking for a breakdown, how the year's been going.
Which line is it? Civil
It's-
preparedness, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We should change that really, basically. We should-
To what?
Talk to Barbara.
Yeah.
To what?
Office of the Community.
Preparedness.
Good.
That was the old-
Management.
that was-
I just,
Yeah.
So we are gonna change, it's somewhat up to Barbara, it has to do with the flow of the budget going back, but it'll likely change to emergency management.
Oh, okay.
Alright, that's all.
We're not in the 60s anymore.
Right.
Up to this date, we haven't spent a lot of our money that we had budgeted for last year. We've been very cautious about that. We've made repairs within the office ourselves. We haven't bought a new file cabinet. I came here one day and I saw Rick and I said, boy,
Stole it.
we need a file cabinet. We don't need one with a lock on. It would be nice, but it just means another key and the door's locked. He very kindly brought that one down and we saved $300 and some by doing that. We recycled some of the folders by crossing off the labels on the top. Let's see.
that's preparedness.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's just, we keep the labeled folders in the office and the new ones we hand out to somebody. We haven't really, we fixed the phones ourselves, you know, instead of ordering new phones from Staples. We spent $25 on batteries and we signaled them and everything.
Good.
Gone to several seminars.
Yeah, we've gone to several. Sean's very involved in Red Cross, which is a tremendous help.
Partner,
You just can't do here, there, and everything. He heads south to Danbury where they're located, and he has all those files in order, ready to go, packets for people, and we communicated with the fire department on a regular basis about that. What else did we look into? Oh, we've looked into the trailer, our trailer. And we had a couple of people look at it to see if the tires are fine. It was suggested that we do take it and have it serviced for the brakes. It hasn't, they get rusty. And you don't need to be hooking onto the trailer and down the road you go and you can't go anywhere, you know, so that would be another expense. But all in all, we have not had a lot of expense, but last year we applied for a grant for a drone and we didn't receive that.
because we were competing against the boat.
Yeah, we had the boat after us, and we very graciously acknowledged that, and, I think we were meeting, and I said, fine, that's wonderful, good luck, be safe, you know. We have found, after going to other departments, other towns, other sources like Connecticut State Police, the DEEP, that somebody in this area needs a drone that a trained person, licensed person could use. We could use it all in the entire west coast of Connecticut. And we've gone that far and asked and inquired, and everybody's pretty thrilled about the possibility of us having a drone, especially with the Appalachian Trail. We've even talked to the Appalachian Trail people.
It was essential during the
Yeah.
ice jam.
Yeah,
So we used a kid's one, and And I was on a part of that, I was in that detail, and it's amazing what we can do. We actually saw where the ice was breaking up, and we got all our information. As a matter of fact, it's a case study that the National Weather Service is using for our drone footage that we had, so. But it's important, it saves lives, and it's quick and easy. And with the new drones, they have infrared cameras, you can spot somebody. As a matter of fact, sometime last week, last week somebody was found, an old man was found in the woods.
Yeah.
It took them 30 hours to find him. They tried the dogs, they tried search parties, but finally they decided to use a drone. Half an hour, and they found him.
Yeah.
So, I
Who
mean,
put that out? State police?
No, I think it was Bloomfield.
Bloomfield Police,
Yeah.
But the search and rescue capabilities are really what's driving the,
yeah, because
And the fire department does not have one.
No,
there's
And they don't have one?
fairly extensive training. That
right.
It's
And they can be
It's
expensive.
30 days, and then to get your license after that, if you pass the test, it's another two months, so you have to wait for your license to get passed. But you have to do FAA 107
Mhm.
and get that done first before you do anything else.
Just help me here, because I don't know that world. Why is it your role to do it versus the police or the fire department?
Well, we think we can be there quicker and faster and have better response time than anybody else.
Okay,
And we don't, we can, I've had some sort of experience with it before, so, whereas some of these other guys may not have a chance to do it yet, so.
It's a lot of learning, it's a lot of training. John's willing to do this, don't ask me to, I don't even know how to turn it on. I'm just the one to carry it from the office to the car, and make sure it gets back there.
Yeah, my question is not so much not being able to do it, is
What department?
like
you wanna put it in?
when something happens, who's in charge?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like the ice jam happened, and some state guy came down and said, I'm in charge, and I'm like, okay.
Well, no, that's only because of the proclamation that this
Right.
town issued.
Okay,
That she had to do a proclamation for them to come in and help us.
okay, but then I'm not clear as to, I don't think it's a problem, I don't have a problem with it, I'm just wondering where it lands, whether it lands in your budget, fire departments, or, or state police.
I personally think it needs to be cared for, maintained. There's no attitude in emergency management, that's mine, that's yours, you can't use it unless I say so, and that type of thing. That's not happening. 10 years ago, the emergency management in the town of Kent had a locked door
Mhm.
that had paper over the window. They had physical fights within that office. The equipment was damaged. That's not the case anymore.
Okay.
The paper came down the very first day. My number's there. Anybody who needs anything, as you know, Ed, anybody, whether it's fire department or the rapport between the emergency management and the fire department is now, like this. We're kids and cousins, and really, there's no problem, and quite honestly, I won't put up with any of it. And anybody's invited to come into the office when we have the ice situation. Jean needed a computer. Come in, there's a computer right there.
I think maybe what you're more talking about is emergency management the right place to be?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I understand that it would be beneficial for the town to own it versus a private entity or the state police, if you will. If you're the person who is supposed to release a drone and we're in an emergency situation, you happen to be in Fort Lauderdale,
Right.
who do we have, do you know what I mean?
Right,
So like,
and
how, and again, I
And
think the premise is fine, it's just,
Yeah,
I wanna make sure it lands in the right spot.
Well, yeah, we'll do
pun
that.
intended.
Yeah, so we'll have a backup at all times, so you have coverage 24 hours.
I guess I'm more worried about,
Privacy?
know that you all are only two people, and in a townwide emergency, you both are the one-armed paper hangers.
Well, basically,
And maybe it might make sense to partner with the fire department where they can have, or even a regional, create a regional team where, like the dive team, where the asset can be used in a larger,
it's a good point. What I did, I created, after the ice jam, I created a group of individuals from town volunteers to do sheltering. So I now have a team of sheltering people. So I mean, we can set up a team. It's easy to do, it's not hard to do. But the training is the most important part, going through the FAA regulations 107 But other than that, I mean, the technology is fantastic. I mean, they can spot infrared even in through the water, so if somebody goes in the water, if somebody goes up on a trail, I mean, you don't have to search the whole mountain to look for somebody, you can do it in a couple of minutes. You know?
Dear guy.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah, actually it gives off different temperatures, yeah.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, so it's amazing, these things are fantastic, and I think it's, you know, you can't put a price on a life, I mean, this is, if we save somebody or we do something great, it's fantastic, so. This is the thing of the future.
I did contact Connecticut State Police. They have 2 troopers who are trained in this, but they don't have the drone.
Yeah.
Okay,
That comforts me.
that, right,
No, it does,
I mean,
because
me
it
too.
means if you guys are out of town, or
Exactly.
somebody can't do it,
exactly.
they can come, take the equipment and use it.
Right.
That's,
Yeah, and they have a key to the fire department all the time, so.
that's, to me, makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I would suggest is that if you're going to be the managers of it, fine, but just make sure that everybody's wrapped in
Right.
and so that there's a real,
You know Tate Begley, DEEP, he's also certified in this.
Okay.
So that's, he knows a deer as opposed to a little lady like some of them.
Okay.
And Ed, are there fire department members that would be interested in
Yeah,
getting trained and partnering?
it was brought up at the Northwest Fire Chiefs meeting, 2 meetings ago, quickly, but then they, right away, who would have it?
Mhm.
You know, right away, that kind of a deal if they purchase one, so I think Kent would benefit to have one for themselves more than try to regionalize one and find out who's got it, where it is, cause
Yeah.
when you need it, you're gonna need it,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Mhm.
Just like when you call and say you need sandwiches.
Right.
There's sandwiches, there's cheese or ham, whatever you want, is there, you know?
So that would be a grant, one of the,
Well, part of it would come out of the money that's out of that budget, so.
well, what do they run, like $3,000?
It depends on which, because you gotta get a case for it, and you gotta, the unit itself is $3,000 with infrared. Then, this one in particular, okay, is 2 heated batteries, so you can operate below 0 temperature. It's completely encased so that water won't bother it. The trouble with drones right now is the fact is that anything over 30 miles per hour winds,
Right.
you can't fly, right? And this one has all kinds of navigational tools on it, so it won't go any more than 300 feet, which is the law. So we can't go any higher than 300 feet, it automatically shuts it down. And it's gonna, I think it's 25 something it was, so I don't know what it is now, but because of
Okay.
the virus going on and because it's made in China, it's hard.
Has some limitations.
Yeah, so we have to wait to see what the price would be if we get the okay. But yeah, definitely, whatever we can't make up through some of that budget, we could probably do through a grant. We tried First Choice before and our application was denied because of the vote, but we could try them
First
again.
Light.
First light, yeah.
Yeah, and if we could try them again, and also I could talk to John Field, maybe there's something through MS that we can get something.
Yeah, I know there's the EMPG grant that
Okay, yeah,
we've never
he talked
taken
about,
advantage of.
yeah, he talked about that
wonder-
at the Red Cross meeting, yeah.
Yeah, we should definitely start, it's sort of,
Focusing on that, yeah,
yeah, it's a $5,000 that,
yeah. Don't have to pay for it.
and it would completely supplement
Yeah, exactly.
that.
I don't know who you would have, do you want us to research that at all, or?
Yeah, that would be great. John Field said it's, sort of a no-brainer, and
Okay, great, yeah,
most other towns do it.
okay,
Well, your trend line is around spending around $3,000 a year.
right.
And if that tracks this year or next year, you'll only have $2,000 to spend.
Right.
So,
We'll get the money.
okay.
We may do.
We will get the money.
And
We
as
may
far
do.
as this year,
We have,
what else are you?
as far as this year's thoughts, I wanna do, I mean, our computers are 10 years old, they're not used that much, excuse me. We've had them updated, and the phones are fine, the radios are fine. The office needs to have the floor washed, and that's about it. We don't anticipate any problems, except we don't want just another flood and food and stuff for people for days. One question I forgot to ask in the beginning, hazardous mitigation fund, are we giving money to that this year?
I know that
That's part of
you
the
all
COG,
are
right?
due to do your, it's a 5-year cycle for the hazard mitigation plan, and I think
We're
due
due.
to do it, yeah.
Yeah, see, I have no clue.
Oh, you don't get that from John Field?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
It actually,
So that you
we
guys
noticed
got
it
it
because we
from
were going
John
over the
Field.
budget and then
Yeah.
Bruce took it out of the funds and didn't say
Last,
anything.
never told us, there was an email that was sent. You
I
got it,
assume
Jeff
that
got
you were on the,
You guys all got a copy,
I had no idea.
so that we were wondering where that 1,500 disappeared to.
Now, Barbara gave me that. I asked her, and she very kindly got up and went digging through the files and gave me that.
yeah, I don't know why, I assumed that you guys were on that ambulance.
No.
When we look back around with John.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, if you could. That's about it for us, right?
Yeah, and as far as our trailer, blankets and pillows, we have blankets donated to us every year. And the man that donates them is a father, Ken School. He runs a cleaning business, and he has extra blankets. I don't know where he gets them from, they're all the same color.
That's great.
And get boxes of them, and that's fine, we have them cleaned and then put in the trailer. We're down a couple cots, maybe 10 cots, but we've gone through sources to have those replaced. Where the other ones went to, I have no idea. You know, our radios are fine, we both have cell phones, there used to be a camera there, there was a digital thing, was a little bit that big, batteries corroded in it, so I just had to throw it out. And quite honestly, he has a camera, I have a camera, everybody has a camera, and in their phone, and that's probably the best thing to do. And not that we don't wanna spend $100 on a camera, it's just that we wanna have it accessible right there, so we don't have to run and get a camera.
So the Red Cross and Emergency Management came up with 2 sheltering places, Marblewood School and South Kent School. And the agreements are gonna be signed by April, so we'll have that. So a total of 500 people can be held up in those units. So we're working together, the Red Cross and Emergency Management to get it done. So.
I just need to mention, across the river, there's a little house on the edge of the river there, it has a cable that goes across the river. They used to do samples of water and whatnot there. US Geological Survey people contacted me and they don't want it anymore. There's a pump in there, there's a cable in there, there's a building there, and they asked me to find somebody who wanted it. Well, Connecticut Antique Machinery is very, very interested in it, and I didn't want to say, go ahead and take the thing out of there without telling you folks. There's no value there, it's more of a pain in the neck to remove it, but these gentlemen know how to do that sort of thing. And Tom Sargent from the US Geological people are coming out to meet with them. So I don't know if that would be okay with you folks, or I have to ask you again, or bring you out there.
It's USGS's building.
Okay.
And who owns the building?
Yeah.
USGS, yeah.
And we have no say.
All right,
No,
so
but if
when
you
you see a
just notice-
building going down the road on a trailer, you'll know
Yeah,
that,
right.
you know, and they're gonna float
It's
it
an
across the
antique,
river,
it's really an
you know.
antique, yeah.
That nobody has been in the building since 1985.
Yeah.
They're supposed to check it regularly, they haven't done it. The door got ripped off, Bob and I, my husband and I went down there and reconnected it, everything's fine, and I know the man has the key now. So if it disappears and somebody says something to you, you know, it's okay, all right.
Or we can just make it lore.
Right.
Somebody stole the house, you
Right,
can't.
that's a really good story.
1860s.
So,
Do you have any, plan where you send out Everbridge test messages?
not at the moment, but are you,
I'd be happy to work up some sort of plan with
Okay.
a database.
okay,
I
good.
do worry about a 10-year-old computer, handling
Yeah.
Everbridge.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you might wanna think about, and you know, you could, it probably would make sense for you to go to a laptop or something.
Right.
But we should start just making sure that the database is what we expect and
Okay.
building it up as much as possible, because that's gonna be a key if there's a
Absolutely,
online
yeah.
emergency, so we
And
can.
you can help me with that?
Yeah. it was-
Good, okay,
yeah,
fine,
happy to.
fine. When you talk about computers and whatnot, I'm off the door. I'm like, gone, you know, and you instantly get that sick, you know, I can do it, it's just that, oh, I wouldn't wanna blow up the town again, just because I pushed the wrong
I'm
button.
not gonna do that.
Anyway,
So, yeah, we can plan to meet and
okay,
walk
good.
through it.
sounds good.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you guys gonna talk about the park and rec sometime today, or? Because we had a meeting last night, and I was trying to give you some information, so,
It wasn't on,
is it not on there?
Well, I don't, we have a general
yeah, it's sort of.
operating budget, so if you wanna stick around and give us an update, I think that'd be fine.
Okay, great.
Before we jump into anything else, looking at civil preparedness, in my tenure here, we've never had any sit-down with Litchfield County Dispatch, nor even the state police,
Mhm.
as to, you know, I know the state police is a higher level in terms of the contract, but I think this is clearly an opportunity to meet people, meet groups,
Mhm.
or maybe it's the selectmen's role. Has that been the traditional way?
Yes, we get a very detailed, and I can share it with you, breakdown of what the expenses are and what we're paying for.
Yeah.
Every year we get a detailed,
Are you looking for something more? than
Well,
that, or?
much in like what we've just done, we've talked to a department, talked about their goals, talked about their thoughts, talked about what their future is, talked about even little nitty gritty things about being contacted by, you know, some group to move a house away. I have no clue, other than knowing Dan Soul, how 911 works and why it works for us here. And, you know, limited access and sort of only visual of Andrew and his group that runs through town. But, you know, what are the trends? What are the trends?
they may not necessarily need to come at budget time, since those are both pretty much contractual. I mean, they can come anytime throughout the year and provide a presentation, if that's what you're looking for. I mean,
Well,
budgetarily, your
I
hands
agree-
are tied.
I agree with you. The only thing that is nice about budget time is it starts to come into question as to, well, you know, maybe the town needs something now and maybe we need money for it for next year. I'll make it up. Let's just say Andrew says, I can't cover the whole town. Let's just say as an example. And we decide we want downtown to be patrolled during the heaviest summer hours and he can't because he's going all over town, or at least that's his role. Then maybe we have to think of something and budget something. If indeed there's a desire, need, want for it, I just think there's an opportunity there. Or maybe it is in the future and you say we plan it for next year, but.
We used to meet with them like once a year, the police,
Yeah. Yeah.
just to go over, cause there were lots of changes. You know what I mean? One time it would be, the big argument was when we could try to choose when the trooper was available for special events and things like that. So they would come in.
Yeah. I mean, we scrutinize, you know, some of the smallest line items, and now we have a $200,000 expenditure on the police line where it has huge impact for town, and I just don't know. I think it might be good to do that.
Commander from Falcon.
Excuse me, Chris, if you should have some kind of meeting, whatever, I understand you have in the past, Dan has been included in some of these meetings, and I hear about it down the street, I'm like, I didn't hear anything about that, you know. I really would appreciate being asked to attend, not to voice any opinions, you know, just to
That's
become
good.
aware, you
That
know.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would like to be included in that,
Makes sense.
thank you.
Thanks.
See you later. Go play grandmother.
Miss Deborah, do you wanna come?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I'll start by saying my presentation about moving the tax office and the assessor's office or whatever to the cloud is postponed
Okay.
because Leo's not here, so, this is just what the only changes in there, you asked me for a number for my salary, and I put it in. And the assistants, I just put at 3%. I don't know if you've come to that conclusion or not. And then, what I'm asking for is if you just turn to the second page, which should show the salaries in the town for this year. And this is total compensation. And I guess my general plea is the gap has just become too wide. It's the second page. That's okay. And
I'm sorry,
the gap between salaries has just become, and I'm using salary as a term for total compensation, and the reason for that is taxpayers pay this. And so, because it's all coming from one source, which is taxes, I think that taxpayers need to look at the total package, not just one part of the package. So if you run down the line, you'll see, if you go to the totals there, you'll see great discrepancies. And I think it's time to narrow that gap. And that's pretty much all I'm gonna say about that. If you have any questions, the numbers speak for themselves. If you don't like the fact that I'm looking at total compensation, say so, but as I said, as a taxpayer, and we're all taxpayers, it is total compensation. It all comes from taxes. 88% of our income comes from taxes. Grants are wonderful, but they're not how we pay the bills.
So just looking down this to see if we can do apples to apples.
Okay?
Administrative assistant, town clerk,
Yeah.
ZEO, and park and rec are all full-time.
Right.
Everyone else is part-time.
And full-time is 30 hours?
Well, whatever the hours, I'm just talking full-time.
What is full-time in the
I believe
building?
it's 35 hours?
30 is the minimum.
30 is the minimum.
And I'm saying the gap between what I work,
Right, but you
30
work how many
hours.
hours?
a minimum of 3 days a week,
Which is how many hours?
21.
Okay?
So the gap for that 9 hours, if you want to figure it out per hour, it's pretty costly.
Do you need to work 9 hours? Could you, hold on, bear with me.
Sure.
Could you take some steps to make sure to limit your hours but still keep your same salary?
No, I cannot limit my hours anymore. I could always raise them.
Let me put it differently. Is there any tool that you know of out there that would allow you to do your job with fewer hours? Let's just say your salary is the same.
I don't think at this point, because everything is online, so I don't have foot traffic. If you as a realtor want to look at somebody's bill, you can do it at 10 o'clock at night. You don't have to wait until 9 a.m. to come to my office to do it. So that's all been eliminated. You can pay your bills online, so you don't need to come to the office. I think I've hit just about all of the things to make hours less. And have you asked other departments if they could also limit their hours to get below 30 hours?
Well, it's a good question, but we're not talking about other offices right now.
but
We're talking
it
about your
does-
office, which you've requested, which I get,
Right.
more money, and we asked you, and you've been very courteous to come back and make the argument. I'm positing back to you, because I have seen that experience in some departments, but I've also seen it in the real world, where, you know, many people, the goal is to work fewer hours for more money. I don't think, you know, personally, if you could do your job at half the time, and you proved it, and did it the same well that you did, compensation would make sense.
This
But-
shows that it's being done. I
Well,
can't
it's not
cut
about
it
being
much
done.
more.
I'm just getting back to the concept of, you put yourself against full-time people.
30-hour.
You've made the
yes.
argument that 9-hour difference is a huge discrepancy. I think that there's a reason why you're a part-time person,
Why?
because the role has traditionally only been part-time.
You could say that about other offices in the town also.
Well,
And I think you have to be careful.
Well, I won't be
making a
careful.
general
What I'll tell you,
agreement. Yes.
what my experience is that the town hall, the town clerk has been much busier than she used to be, or the office used to be. The treasurer has been much busier than it used to be traditionally. The zoning and inland wetlands has been much busier. Social services has grown from a, very part-time to a much more full-time position. So I don't see tax collection, in fact, I see it going the other direction. When I started in real estate, most people came in and some banks escrowed you money. And you've been doing this long enough, so what percentage would you agree was probably 25% maybe, 20%, 30 years ago?
30 years for escrows?
Yeah.
It's probably gone from 30 to 40.
No, I mean, when 30 years ago,
Percentage of.
the percentage of people
tax
who were
collection.
paying you with a check versus a bank's escrowed money was probably only 20%.
I'd say it's gone from like 30 to 40.
Okay, it seems to me that every mortgage that I'm involved with, it's always escrowed money.
Lumped into the-
Oh, if it's a mortgage, but town of Kent has a lot of cash sales that don't require mortgages.
Okay.
Our general clientele is not the mortgage-based escrowed clientele. So that's why I'm saying,
What,
I don't know the statistics on that, but I'd be
Yeah.
surprised if many of the people at least have some sort of.
so what percentage of, tax collection is done via an escrow, like rolled into the mortgage?
30 to 40. It's gone
That's
from-
it, only?
Yeah. And real estate bills are not the only bills I deal with.
Mhm.
You know, they're a small part.
Mhm.
I think to say that collecting taxes has gotten easier in today's economy is really not a fair statement. I think collecting money has become more difficult. The bankruptcies are up in the country. There are people who are struggling to pay. There are foreclosures that go on. I don't think it's an easier job.
Well, it may not be easier, there are tools, I think, that make it easier, and there are systems that make it easier. One of
Every
the systems is tax collection via escrow through banks. We know that, and
And that's a small
it'd
portion.
be interesting, it would be very interesting data to have from you as to how many are actually mortgaged in escrow. We figure it out.
But
Well, you say 40%, but
real estate is not,
well, what's your other collection?
cars take up a whole lot of time.
I get that, but cars are,
They take up time, whether they're, you can say a car's
So-
a car, but a $40 bill takes up as much time as a $40,000 bill.
so I'm just gonna bring up the question that came up last time when
Mhm.
we were doing management, is your hours said 18 hours a week on the door, is what I understood.
Yeah, except
So
for
you're 18
Fridays.
hours a week, what do you do with the balance of what, 5 hours, 4 hours? If you're doing 21 hours?
I think you need to look at the total of what is coming in and how the town uses tax money is the base of the money we use to spend. 88% of the income comes from taxes. That's through the assessors and the tax office. You take away 88% of the income of this town, you're in trouble.
Okay,
And
we're
it's
not
not an
talking,
easy
you're
job.
not answering my question.
I'm getting to the answer to your question because you're telling me it's an easier
That's not what
job.
I'm telling
And
you.
it
What I'm
takes,
asking you is, it was reported that you had 18 hours posted on the door, is that accurate?
that's
Okay,
posted on the
so
door.
18 hours. You said you made 21 hours. You say you do 21 hours. Is that accurate?
I work depending on it goes.
But that's what you're
flows.
basing this number on, 21 hours.
If you
Wait,
wanna,
can I just interject? I think you also, what's being ignored is in July and January, it's a full week.
It's
I
not,
think that might be part of where the difference in.
no,
hours
what I'm
is.
trying to balance in my mind
Mhm.
is a full-time versus part-time.
No, I'm not getting into that.
Okay.
That's just-
Because, well, that's what we're getting into when you ask about different hours. All right, so if that's the case, and you're saying, if you do the 18 hours math from what you were paid, it was like $41 an hour, which is on the high side. of what we were talking
Well,
about from the
no,
salaries.
it isn't. If you flip to the next page, you'll see what other area tax collectors make, just in salary. I didn't get into whether they're benefited or not. You know, I think,
So-
you're gonna look at a town like Washington, she makes $55,928 to be a tax
Is she a
collector.
full-time person?
Yeah, that's would be my
Yeah.
question.
But that's just salary. That does not include benefits.
And
So this
what
thir-
are- how many hours does she work?
I don't know. You know, the town hall
It's
is,
gonna be it.
it's whatever the town hall is in Washington. I think it's a 30-hour town hall, but
Do
Well-
they have assistants, do you know?
everybody has.
It's almost over $1 billion worth of valuation.
Well,
What's our 700 valuation,
To the ground list?
do you know?
Yes, I don't
750?
have it in my head, but yeah, it's,
I'm telling you, it takes as much
I
time
think
to
it's
collect.
like, the collection rate is I think 99%
Yeah,
Where?
Here.
Here, yeah. Well, that's
which is,
right.
which is quite high, to be honest.
And you have to realize in collection, it takes as much time to collect $40 in taxes for a car or a personal property bill takes forever to collect. We're talking about time involved in collection, as opposed to someone who probably, we've gotten some really big real estate bills that come in without, whole process takes 5 minutes. So,
Am I losing my understanding here?
yeah,
I'm just asking, you had 18 hours posted. You said it was 21 hours. My question is, and you're saying then there's a 9-hour discrepancy between,
I think anyone in the town hall will say that they work more than their posted hours. I think that's a fair statement. I don't think anyone would argue with that in the building. Joyce, would people argue with that?
No, I agree. That most people probably.
So I think, you know, when you talk about those 3 extra hours, people work more than their posted hours. That's a given in this building.
But he's asking you what you do. So, I mean, since you brought me in, he's asking you what you do. If he asked me how many hours I work and I told him, then I would answer his question and tell him what I do. That's what he's asking you.
I do mail, I do whatever the job curtails, and I can give you a job description of whatever the job curtails, but I really don't know if you wanna know, come and I'll show you.
Okay.
I just think the discrepancy is too large, and I'm pointing it out,
Mhm.
and it's a necessary evil to collect taxes. You could do with a whole lot of other things in this town, but you gotta collect the money or you're dead in the water.
So, I don't understand what that means. What's the implication? That-
The implication is 88% of your income is coming from taxes and you need it to pay the bills. That's that simple. It's a
That's what sets
necessary,
your budgets.
that's budget.
I understand, but are you implying that because, that you should get paid commensurate with the taxes that come in?
No, I'm saying I should be paid commensurate with other salaries coming out of this building, since we all come from the same pot of money. If you look at the discrepancies in total compensation for the people in this building, there are huge discrepancies. And I'm just
so-
saying you need to start equalizing those discrepancies. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that anyone's job, it's not any easier or any harder to do another job, but total compensation has gotten out of whack.
And so again, I'm just making sure that I understand, when you say total compensation, you mean the column all the way to the right with
All
the
the
two
way total.
benefits. So those benefits are a benefit of being a full-time employee. And so there's a sort of a two-step process. There's part-time employees that doesn't include those benefits. And then there are full-time employees where it does include those benefits. So I don't see that it's apples to apples, that you can mash the whole thing together and include the benefit, the fringe, for a part-time employee who's not getting fringe benefits and a full-time employee that is getting. I don't know how you can compare.
I think someone coming in And it was brought up, I think John Johnson made a good point when he said, you know, you should pay people now what the job's worth and not wait. I think a new person coming in will call this a full-time job. They could easily do that. I'm not doing that. But I think a new person could easily do that, and they could point to other towns in the area and say, look, these are full-time. I need to be full-time, I can't get it done in 3 days, I need 5. So why not look at that now, instead of waiting?
But if that were your argument, I get it. If
I
you
mean,
said- if
well,
you
I'm
said,
just saying
Chris,
John Johnson
if
said
you-
it, so I'm repeating it.
Well, I get it, but John Johnson's business, if you will,
Mhm.
has grown significantly from over the number of years. I don't know, and I still don't understand how your business has, work-wise, has grown so significantly when all, and I don't mean to be negative about it, because, and I don't even mean to know all of what you do, I'm sure you do a lot, but what I'm saying is that that scope of work, it seems to me, and I think the general public would have the same sense, has not grown significantly. Your house structures have not grown significantly. I mean, how many more have you put on the tax roll in the last 30 years?
That's
That's not her job.
That's, I don't put houses on tax.
Collection-wise.
Oh, how-
She puts them on, you collect them. How many more people have you had to collect in 30 years? So if your line of argument, you don't have to answer that, but if your line of argument was, when I started this job, I had to collect from 7 people, now it's 77 people, it takes me X amount of time to do, and therefore it's really challenging.
I find
I
it
get that.
strange then for you to say that P and Z has grown, oh, that's such a lot more work and it's a lot bigger. Well, how could P and Z grow and the tax collector hasn't? Because we're all dealing with the same product, it's gotta go through the system,
Well,
you know.
I
and
disagree. I know very clearly Park and Rec has grown significantly. I mean, not Park and Rec, Planning and Zoning has grown significantly.
And that doesn't affect tax collection? There's a gap if it doesn't.
It has nothing to do with tax collection.
Ooh.
Well, you may think it does to the degree that it makes more money, but that's not relevant. What's relevant is your job is to bring in the money.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only a quantifiable number of I don't even know what you call them, units that you need to deal with.
And the number of units has grown, you just said through B and Z.
Okay, so what is that number?
Well, the same
See,
number
you-
you're quoting, because B
No, but
and Z
see-
has grown.
No, see, because P and Z deals with a lot more nuances than just a unit number.
Okay, well, I'm
So
talking.
I don't need to, we don't need to get into
We're
that.
getting-
What I'm simply saying is I think that you're judging yourself against other people and the pot of money we collect.
I
And propor-
collect.
Okay, you collect for us. Proportionately, you expect more money from that.
Proportionally, yes.
And I think
It's
that
fair.
that's a faulty mannerism to say, well, just because we collect X amount of money, you know, then I should say as a second selectman, you know, how much work I put in for this on a volunteer basis, maybe I should get 30 grand a year to be equal with you.
Okay. I'm just saying,
Now,
looking for the future, you might wanna look at this and say, you know, she might be not doing this job for the rest of her life. The new person coming in will probably say it's going to be full-time. Maybe we need to look at this. Not raise it, I'm not saying I'm looking for $100,000, but I think the inequity here is pretty great. And I think most people would say there was a great inequity in salary. So,
Well,
that's
let's
the end of the, end of the
There's a-
May I
discussion.
just interject something? I have some of the similar problems because I work part-time also. And it's not an us versus them, but the gap has gotten wider when you throw in the cost of benefits. We not only work part-time, we don't get any of the bells and whistles, but then we also pay taxes for the bells and whistles. Not a major problem generally, but that's where the gap has gotten significant, is the bells and whistles. And when you say the full-time people have to work 30 hours, when in reality, they get a lot of paid holidays and vacation time that we don't. And that's okay. But this is just a mechanism or some kind of a conversation is to sort of close that gap. It's gotten too wide. As the percentages in the years go by, the gap is significant.
again,
And
I'm sorry.
I'm talking more about myself,
Can we get to you after?
but it's a similar issue.
Okay.
that's that's one part of my issues, I got others. But there is a significant,
Yeah.
and it's a lopsided commitment. You want the commitment for the town and for the position from the part-time people, but the town isn't committed to the part-time people. I'll say no more.
Okay, let me just point out, there's an $11,000 difference between the administrative assistant and you guys.
I'm not getting into that.
I'm just reading it, it's 51,000, this is salary only, because I'm only dealing with salary. I lean towards Gene's perspective that we have to pay, you know where the growth has actually come in discrepancy? It's not your salaries, it's in the compensation. So if your issue is compensation, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Okay. But we can't offer you compensation because you're part-time people. So hold on, so let's,
There's a gap for a little bit of increase.
so let's just,
okay.
so the argument that we need to close the gap,
I'm not saying
With-
totally, but at least make an effort.
I would like to ask a question. I asked Gene, I don't think you sent it to me. If you did, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Didn't we have a report from last
she
year?
sent it, the management review?
Okay.
I sent it to you,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
And
would
what
not-
was that person's recommendation for?
That management review, in my mind, I'm so glad
Okay,
you brought that up.
Right.
The man originally came in, first meeting, he said, I'm going to base everything on total compensation. That was written in the minutes, selectmen approved the minutes, everybody signed off on it. Next meeting, he comes in, he said, I'm not gonna do it on total compensation, I never said that. And that was the end of the discussion, it never went any further. The fact that he said it, it was proof that he said it. So, I
Well,
don't have anything to do with that report.
Okay.
Well, but to be fair, Debbie, if you're gonna bring that up, he also pointed out that if you took your salary at that time, and you divided it by the 24 hours, as he's done it, you would have fallen into the midpoint range, or just about the midpoint range.
And after-
However, he said if you're doing, and we didn't asterisk, he said if you are on the 18 hours that you do, then you would fall into above the maximum. So somewhere in between that 18 and 21 hours, or however you, 24 hours, is where I would look at it, if I were in your position, and say, well, I'm going to keep my salary, and I'm gonna work down and make my office run so efficiently such that I don't have to be in here but 2 days a week.
3 is all, I can't be any more efficient than 3 days. No, even I can't do less than that, I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
So, I think I
I
presented the case.
appreciate that, yeah.
And that's pretty much it, and, you know, I just think you do need to, I do think you need to heed John Johnson's words about you should pay people now, not wait. And also, he was talking about performance review, I think elections are performance reviews for elected officials, and we just went through that, so I think that's
Point
done.
well taken.
So.
Can I ask you, just because we did ask the emergency services, give us a 5-year out, 10-year out of what your job entails, what your office entails, what new strategies or new computers or new programs are happening, and take you out of the equation. What's the next person going to be giving us?
Could very well be the state will take over.
The state, okay.
Yeah.
There's talk of the state regionalizing taxes and assessment. That's talk, I'm not sure.
Right,
But
but
it's
that's,
out there.
I appreciate that. So that's a thought,
Yeah, scary,
yeah.
but it's a thought. And once the state gets something in there, to be perfectly frank, I think they want, this televised, I think the state of Connecticut looks at this area, this northwest corner, as a pot of money.
Yes, they do.
And I think they want it. And I think they will do everything in their power to come and take it over. Is that bad? I don't know. Is it good? Maybe in the long run it is. But I think that's a 5-year projection for taxes and assessment.
And if it's not, what in the next 5 years should we and the other boards going forward prepare for in your office?
Oh, I think the new person coming in will definitely say, oh my gosh, this is a harder job. We heard it from the first selectman last night at the town committee meeting. This is a harder job than I ever realized. It looks so easy on the outside. You'll hear that from the new person coming in. I can tell you dollars to donuts, you will.
And if you're here for the next 5 years, we hope, What do you, aside from the funding being a secondary component of it, what do you need to make your office run better, faster, more efficiently?
You know, I keep up with the trends for the state. We go to, all tax collectors talk to each other. We all try to be competitive with one another, and so it will be more efficiency in storing information, and computers are always changing and becoming, you know, giving out more information. And otherwise, collecting money is still collecting money.
Yeah,
Tax
sure is.
collection goes back to the Bible.
Yes, it does.
Basic things have not changed. Tax collectors are still viewed about the same as they were in the Bible, so, you know, that hasn't changed.
You said the cloud was on hold.
Yes, Leo is working on it because he wants to put together a plan for other towns. Obviously, there are other towns in the state who are looking, and he said, I don't want to present a plan unless it's rock solid and it's going to apply to everybody. So when it comes in, it comes in.
I just wanted to make sure that it
It will
wasn't
be
something that you was
a
like,
viable, good plan when he presents it.
and you
So
feel
thank you.
confident that it'll be
I,
in time for this budget?
that I do not know.
You said he's meeting this week on it,
He's
right?
meeting-
So,
He's meeting as we speak.
right, that's-
Obviously, other towns are doing their budgets, so he's under pressure to get it done.
Mhm.
But maybe he'll, I have no idea what his outcome
And do you
will
have
be.
a sense that he's gonna wanna come and sit?
Oh, he's always very good about coming and sitting and talking. He's-
No, does he want to? Like, is that, so you said he's talking to other towns, does that mean he's talking with doing that base work with the other tax collectors? Or he needs to come before us to have the conversation?
I don't think he's willing to. I don't know if he needs to. The need is up to you. He's willing. He, you know, he's always happy to tell you what he's doing.
No, I imagine, I just wanted, I'm not quite clear on if you wanted him to come and, if it was something that was as complicated,
It's totally up to you.
I don't see it as a very complicated thing, right? I
Good.
mean, it should be a,
Shouldn't be that hard.
right, it should be a
Yeah, that's,
plan of,
but any questions, he's happy to answer.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Debbie, can I have a copy of that for the minutes,
Oh,
please?
here, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really feel like this is like a Price is Right. Now that it's all live like this.
What prize did we get?
Still have to figure out the music part. Well,
We had that conversation last time about the cloud thing, and I got back to you and Joyce on that. We got clear on that. I'm not sure whose budget that would end up going in,
I know.
so that's, I gave you all last time, like a listing of all some of the things we do sort of annually. I don't know if you had time to go over it. It's sort of boring, I understand that too.
I don't recall what,
It was attached to the budget, it was just a
Your
sort of
request
recap of all
to the budget?
it was just a recap of sort of like an annual
Mhm.
overview of what we do. That's okay. The only thing that I'm concerned about is that we live within cycles that don't necessarily go with the fiscal year. Because we work like October 1st to September 30th, which overlaps fiscal years and gets a little complicated because of different functions that we do. And I have to go back a year. We did the reval process with data mailers, on-site visits, and we did that all in-house for the last reval, which was completed a year ago. We saved the town around $80,000. That was one of our goals. We met the goal.
Right. And that's when we also decided to help you, that was your argument for upping your assistance at the time.
Well, they also cut back because Jim went full-time.
Mhm. But
And
it
then you
was
cut
the-
back and then you cut the budget.
But
I
the-
just
but
want
the-
some of that money back, that's
Well,
all.
but I just wanna, if we're gonna give historical perspective, I'd like to add the perspective such that yes, we brought in reval in-house and you did a fabulous job and you saved us money.
Yes,
But part of that quid pro quo concept was to make sure that in-house we bolstered your assistant lines, and that's what we did when you capped that as well. So,
but it was,
I-
you cut the budget $8,000 the year, that last year before.
well, that was based on, I believe, your recommendation that you could get it done for less money.
I agree, no, it was cut an additional 4,000.
Okay.
That's all I want back, I just want back what was taken away. I just want back in those lines what was taken away. As far, I don't know what you're planning on, percentage increases, is there any thoughts on that?
On the,
For
salaries?
salaries or for?
I don't think we haven't come to a consensus now.
Whatever it is, that's fine for me, I just want, see, that the 4,000 that was eliminated, and I'll give you a copy, or I'll make sure you get a copy of what I was given.
What year was that?
But that was, it was, I haven't got it, it wasn't last year, it was the year before, I believe. And that's, part of the problem is with the reval stuff, that's, you had questioned, or I think somebody had questioned the mileage. Our mileage is down last year because of the reval stuff. They did some of the final work, we had done prior work on inspections and stuff for the savings in the reval.
'Cause I don't know.
I think it was reduced around $4,000, from 8 to 4. I'd already taken out 4 of the 8.
And where was that reduced? Just different?
In the
Lines.
additional. and
No,
part-
but I mean certain lines or just overall?
It was taken out of the assistance lines.
Oh, the assistants
And the
line?
reason they were there was money going back was because they were significantly underpaid for a long time, and it was hard to get that pay scale up, and that, part of that was eliminated with the,
So
No,
I
but
think the two
hold on. On the last go-around, we just bumped all the assistants.
But-
Yes, we did. Your assistants got more, and
but I
we
don't, but I'm only
made
talking.
both your
well, I'm
assistants.
only, you look at the figures, if you go back and review the figures, you'll see what I mean.
Okay, but
It's just
we-
4,000 I'm looking for in the assistance line, so we can continue to go forward and do the cost-saving measures to save the town money and have a good solid tax base. We got through a revaluation, we saved the town significant funds, we ended up with 1 court case, and we have only 1 appeal this year, it's not bad.
So the 17.
I don't have the.
Ending 18 and then fiscal year ending 19 were within $700 of each other. So was it in fiscal year 16 that there was this $4,000?
There was some, because of the increase, it got a little skewed in there, 'cause it was in the other line. I think it was in the, I'd have to look at my older budget. I don't have that.
Because the assistance in 17-18 was just over 21,000 and 18-19 was just over 22,000. And budgeted for this one we're in now is just over
I don't have the sheet you have,
28,000.
I have a different, I have the worksheet. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. Other than that, I think, we got the $2,500
Yes.
posting thing done. 4,000 on that. Some of the studies, Chris, that you did refer to, those studies were flawed because they're a year older and the information provided in the study was not correct. I did some review of those and figures that were given that were used for that study were flawed.
I get it, and I think we all agreed that it wasn't the most,
I'm
You know,
just,
it's
I'm
like
just
a-
saying it was flawed, and when, you know, when you're the part of the big flaw, it's a problem, just so you know.
yeah.
I just want you to know, I know that, it's okay, because, you know, we're not that provincial here. Okay, that's about it, I don't think we have anything else. We're gonna be be starting I&Es, mailing out next year. And we have a PA 490 review coming up for this cycle.
What's a PA 490?
The farm forest and open space classifications.
And how many fall into it, do you know?
Not off the top of my head, but I believe it's on the sheet I gave you last time.
Farm and forest.
And that shows the penalties we collected also through the years that average somewhere around 30,000 since like '98. That's harder than money, to say the least. But I don't know that do you have any more questions? Pretty simple stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anybody?
Leah.
Oh, right.
Debbie, can you tell Leah that, can you get Leah for us? Thank you.
Seeing as they brought up the point about assistance, just doing a quick run through here. Where's the treasurer? There it is. All right, so tax assessor has a $30,000 assistant line. The tax collector has a $14,000 assistant line. The town clerk has a $20,000 assistant line. The treasurer has a $12,000, and P&Z has call it $11,000 assistant line.
Mm-hmm.
And for the amount of work, you could argue, because I'm not going to deal with numbers and things that aren't presented to me on a piece of paper so that I can understand an argument. I think that part of the compensation is maybe we look at the compensation for the whole department. Maybe that's a better way to look at it. Looking at it as department compensations. Because basically, while one individual in the department may work harder, Eugene, and Ed and I, it's still under the umbrella that you have me, Ed, and the administrative assistant as part of your operations. And that's really, you have to get the most efficiency out of all of us from a compensation line. And I think that's a maybe fairer way to look at it. I also don't think compensation as we know it, meaning health or anything like that, is even something we should
The
throw in.
benefits part.
Thank you, the benefits.
Hey,
I think that is at least a worthy, process to go through, to look at it at the
Mhm.
departmental level.
Yeah.
And it may, just thinking about it, it may reveal something that we haven't looked at.
Welcome back.
thank you.
Again, what page are we on here? Building official, wetlands, planning, zoning, clerk. I'm sorry.
Starts on page 6. No, yes, no, that's the senior center. I'm trying to find where we should be.
She's in the middle of page 6.
Middle page
I got
6,
it.
thank you. I never understood why we never alphabetized the departments. I mean, I just never understood why,
Is it?
but it's gotta be some reason. Anyway, thank you.
You had asked me back to bring some specific information, but there's just one item I wanted to talk to you about before we start going into the information that I
Yep.
provided you there, you had
Mhm.
requested. When I initially came to you through the budget process and spoke to you about trying to develop the senior center as a whole, I didn't come to you with the idea that we were gonna necessarily reinvent the wheel, meaning that the fact that it's with 2 departments, and that's currently where we are.
Mhm.
There was mentioned at the last meeting that the thought was that we were paying you were paying, or the town was paying, or the taxpayers were
Yep.
paying, two departments to do the same thing, but it isn't. Both departments have specific duties and function within those duties. If a department as a whole, as it exists right now, all the departments, if you took that duty of the senior center and took it and put it with one department, that department doesn't necessarily have that expertise or training to do all the functions that are needed at at the senior center. They each have their own duties that they do and that they're responsible for and that come together to form. I am do not have the skill set that the other department involved in the senior center does. I just don't. My training is very specifically around social services and social work. So, that piece actually is already in place. You already have that other piece, the recreational activity piece within a department. So to me, and this is my personal and professional opinion, it's what you do with it is kind of your role, but I just don't see at this point it would be something that would make best sense. I think if you were speaking to the taxpayers as a whole and justifying making changes at the senior center, all I was looking at was to be able to have supervised hours where we're definitely open, where programming could be done and activities could be done to start developing people coming there and identifying it as the senior center. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that. Do I make, you still don't get it?
So you're telling, let's be specific.
I'm trying not
Park
to.
and Recreation goes over there and does what?
Recreational activities.
Give me an example. Puzzles, games,
You would have.
holiday-based themes?
Yes.
All of the above.
Okay.
Yes.
All of the above.
Yeah.
And you're saying that your department doesn't have those talents?
Well, I'm just saying that role is not
Okay,
part of my
maybe that's
department.
unfair. Your department that's not your role.
Right, exactly.
Okay, but now you've advocated having an individual there who is going to be available for, hold on.
Yeah.
You showed us a calendar with trips and with, that had going to.
Right, as an example of a whole senior center in
senior
itself.
Okay.
What a senior center in the future would look at.
Which
When I came in
did I understand
front-
that you were going to,
No,
okay, maybe I misunderstood.
and so in the packet you received,
Mhm.
you will clearly see that everything that's listed there, everything that you're shown on the calendar are truly items and activities that would be under the role of municipal agent and social service director.
And so just to also fill in the gap here, Leah and I had a couple of conversations after that
Mhm.
meeting, and I specifically said, go back to the standard at the state level, go back to the standard at the national level, because it
Mhm.
should all be a trickle down
Mhm.
for the scope
Mhm.
of her practice, in a
Yeah.
sense, as the
Yeah,
municipal
got
agent for the elderly. And so that's the baseline for where she's starting from in what her.
Right,
the
because
vision
really,
is.
that's what my role right now as it stands is limited to, is exactly that. The only thing in that packet that I did provide you, so you can again see an overview, is a captured from, I think it's the National Association of Senior Centers or whatever it is a scope of what an entire senior center would do, according to national standards. That I presented to you in itself, and that's part of your packet that you have today. Because you asked to see the scope of a senior
Right.
center. Not the scope of a senior center with just as my department is established at this time, and the role that I currently have within that department, but for you to see as a whole what a senior center would do. Okay?
all right.
So I just wanted to clarify that, because I think, when you're sitting in a meeting and you're doing it right in the moment, you can interpret things differently, but thank goodness you guys tape everything, so it's actually in retrospect to go back myself presenting and see it again, and see where there are gaps that I wanted to make sure that I could clarify. That was one of the things that I was concerned about.
And so you see being able to run this new proposed idea in concert with Park and Rec there?
Yeah,
Okay, so then the logical question for me is, if your department is covering things, do the seniors need to have also more activities from Park and Rec? And to me, it's always money. Why am I paying someone from Park and Rec to be there doing something when I've got somebody on staff already from another department that could just maybe stretch a little bit, maybe not under your purview right now, but I'm not setting this department up against another department, please understand me. I'm just asking the question, why are we spending two resources in one spot where there are limited numbers, firstly, and not taking a holistic approach, which got me excited last time when you were
Yes, it
taking the
did.
holistic approach
yes, yeah.
under one umbrella. And I'm not saying that you're advocating it, I know that. And I know, and I'm not saying that Park and Rec is advocating one way or the other. I just think that we ought to make this little, this situation right the first time.
Yes.
And I understand Park and Rec has really done a great effort in trying to keep seniors, and where it has been lacking, if you will, for a long time, they have filled in very good service. I just think that maybe you have to have dialogue with Park and Rec and social services and maybe somebody over at the senior center to figure out what is the best mix. To make sure that our money goes the right way and not that we're spending money on all different things.
Right, I'm not.
Because Park and Rec resources, if they say, great, we're freed up to do that, we can do X, Y, and Z. Or vice versa.
Mhm.
I don't know what else you want to say. Yeah,
I think it's,
when Leslie's back, well, it's a
It- but the-
conversation that.
the implication is based on money. And the money is, right now, there's a request to have somebody do something
Mhm.
beyond that. And it might be symbiotic for a while, but I don't think it's something we should sustain. Meaning, spending two different departments' money on one thing, if indeed we can, maybe for an extra hour or two, get coverage from the social services side.
Do you want me to hear my professional opinion?
Mhm.
If I was looking at long-term planning, like going forward, not in this moment and in this request, it would make, I think over time, if the involvement is there and if the numbers equate to
Mhm.
making sense, that a lot of towns have developed a separate, I don't know if it would be, because you have to excuse me, I don't know all the municipal in and outs of developing departments and making departments, but a separate position, not tied to social services,
Right.
not tied to Park and Rec,
Got you.
that would be the senior center coordinator. And that person would have oversight.
Right.
Sherman's a little different, and I thought I had been, at the time, explaining the differences between how, not that their way is the way to go, but there are some differences. In their town, Park and Recreation does not have a responsibility tied to their department or a role tied to their department where they need to put those kinds of activities within their senior center. It just isn't there. So that's why the person that coordinates their senior center had stepped up to the plate and just did it all.
Right.
Yeah, but the municipal agent role is still attached to their social services director, who comes in and meets with, and I believe is still housed in the same building, and provides information and resources to the senior population. So, it's just kind of put together a little differently, but it is a totally separate role.
So here's the simple
Yeah.
question for money. This is the only way I look at it.
Okay.
Are you willing to give up money from your budget, and Park and Rec willing to give up money from their budget, because you're both covering seniors, to hire me to be the person running seniors? And your answer is gonna be, no. And Park and Rec's
Why
gonna
do
be,
you think-
no.
Why do you think?
And the
all
bottom
this
line
money
is, my
is-
government starts to grow, and
Uh-huh.
we could, we can,
Right,
and we
right.
can service everybody and anybody. I've said this before, your department could grow into probably 7, 10 people. You know that and I know that.
Mhm.
But the town can't afford to do all of that, so we do what we can.
Right,
And if you go back to the old days, look at these guys who are the fire department members, they're still working off the old days, and we're
Mhm.
clinging to it, and we know just down the road it's all paid, and it's
Mhm.
coming. So, it concerns me that we're digging down for, how many people, 15? Seniors, 20?
Not by stats, but we're not
In-
pulling them in because we don't have anything.
Okay, but it's sort of like, you know, the old, if you build it, they will come. And not to say that
Mhm.
you don't want to do that, because we want to be generous and do that, but, you know, to the taxpayer, at what point do we say, you know, I mean, think about it this way. I equated to a board I was on one time where we gave away money for the arts. We raised $250,000, given money, and kids wouldn't even come and ask for money. So then what did we do? We went out and begged kids to come and take money that we were raising. I was like, this is insane. So sometimes we go out and make more work than may be necessary.
But then you're going back to 2006. And the
Okay.
population gets bigger and bigger.
I get it, but what I'm simply saying, if that's the case, would you be willing to cut your budget and park and rec so that we can create another budget? Because I don't think what we should do is raise or tax more money to find another person who's just gonna run and just do that programming, and then you grow your department and park and rec grows their department. And and it's less on you because you're not doing it right now. But park and rec has been doing it, if you will, been covering, and we've been paying for their services. So I hear you having a simple, having a different person. I just don't think that, I think personally, I think it should fall
But
under,
I don't think that should be done now. That's why I presented in my budget a baby step. I didn't say, go ahead, do the big picture, do the whole thing right now.
no, I know you didn't say that.
And I did that purposely because I think you have to build things over time. If you're gonna be truly accountable to the taxpayers, you can't, well, you can do
Anything you want.
you want, but, I think if you're being real diligent about it and that little steps at a time and development over time makes so much better sense for accountability than kind of leaping in and then have to say, oops, and pull it back.
Failed in a big.
Yeah, but you did reference the fact that Sherman had created this separate position. And
For
Sherman's,
the future,
no, Sherman has. I'm not-
they
I'm-
have over
and-
time, it
right.
didn't start there.
So what I don't want, I don't think is, unless the numbers are different, to prove to me, I think we should decide who takes care of the seniors and how we take care of them, if you will, and then put the department in charge of it.
I think that's kind of the way we left it. So
I
that
thought
we were
that's
gonna
how we
look
left
into
it.
The problem is
And-
you did a fantastic presentation
Yeah.
and you showed a need. No,
No,
really,
you
you
did.
did, and you
I
showed
agree
an
with you.
excellent
You
need
did.
for the programs that are needed over there.
Mhm.
And so we need to decide, we both, I think, the way, when I left the meeting, I was agreeing with you 100%. I didn't know how many people would really come out and support it, because we've been doing this for years and years. I know my mother would never go there, because that's just the way she is. She doesn't
Right.
wanna go
And
with
there are
other
people
seniors.
like that, there definitely
But-
are.
Right, so that's why I
It's, yeah.
think we need to discuss it and decide the need, and it's it's been going on forever and ever and ever, the senior center, and we need to decide who, if one person needs to run it, to line up, like you said, so you know who's coming in and doing what activity, and it's coordinated over a month, so people know, so Park and Rec isn't planning something, and then you're planning a little seminar for oil assistance or something, which you're kind of doing now, but maybe it's something to look at.
Well, and I agree with that 100%. I was excited when you presented it, and I will say for the record, in no way, shape, or form did you try to step on anyone's toes or department's toes. You just presented something which I think is certainly germane to where we're going. That's why I think discussion with Park and Rec and how we make this right. But I think that's, it's the way to go, what you laid out. I don't know. Park and Rec historically didn't take care of killer senior needs.
No.
When I was chairman of Park and Rec, they did nothing for seniors, because there was no assistant at the time, so.
Right.
So it has morphed over time when looked like there was need for something, that's what they covered and filled
other
in.
programs were slowly
And yes,
getting
as-
smaller, like the
as-
basketball
Exactly,
programs and
as the
soccer
sports and
programs
kids programs started to fall to the wayside because there weren't the numbers, the focus shifted. reasonably so, but I think it's a time to look at it differently.
So we're at, well, for the next, I'm trying to think, next regular meeting,
You're right,
So
I
2
would do
weeks.
it at a regular meeting.
yeah, we can ask, have Leslie come in and continue this.
Well, I think, honestly, I think it's a discussion Park and Rec has to have, a philosophical discussion. If indeed we believe that we're going to put our resources here and that there can be, well, before I categorize that, are you saying that the person, the assistant who's going to be program director, if you will,
Was the hope that that position would morph into it?
Would morph
We
into
discussed
it.
that last year's budget.
right,
Yeah.
so would that person be able to do what Park and Rec is doing now in addition to the other services that are happening?
That would have to be a conversation with her, because she was hired, that position with a different
Right, I
job
get it.
description.
Right,
You know, so,
but we all get different job descriptions.
mhm.
I started real estate doing something and now I do it totally different. You too, we all do something
And not to
different.
keep going back to Sherman,
Yeah, but let's.
but let's.
Right.
The reason that town really, over the last couple of years, because this whole thought's been in my head for a while, that I kind of picked on that particular town, is because they grew in a way sort of similar where I saw this growing. The Suzette, the current social work, the senior center coordinator, she actually was the assistant to the social services director.
Gotcha.
And she will tell you, I mean, she's the nicest woman, that quite honestly, she had no experience in running a senior center, but she was starting to help a little more over time, and then that's when it was determined that they really needed to kind of have one person kind of focusing on just the senior center. And they, you know, for about the same size town, they have a pretty active senior center.
Maybe we need to talk to her,
I
ask her to come in.
that was the other thing I was just gonna mention. I mean, I hate to go back to where they were in 2006, and I know I keep bringing that up, where they had this working group. That working group was really put together to look at programming, just programming for seniors, and kind of, not really in the focus of overall developing a senior center, but more so to look at ideas for programming, things that can be done. I kind of think there's a lot of still research to get out there, places to go, other towns to look at, on how they, small towns in particular, how they put together their senior center, or whether they have one, you know, and what they have as services for seniors. That there, it would be, to me, it would be, make sense to put together some kind of group, not a commission, or it could just be, I don't know the parameters of the selectmen determining they're gonna put a group together. So, it's maybe on my skill set.
Well, you could just sit
So,
down,
but you know,
you could sit down, you, Jean, Park and Rec, and people who are over at the senior center, Templeton Farms,
mhm,
could sit down, I think, and bang out an idea as to what would be the best for everybody.
mhm,
Right now, you know, the funding's there,
mhm.
it's just given to Park and Rec, and we'd have to think about how that works. And Park and Rec has already dropped the senior luncheon, I get it, it wasn't into their sort of concept of recreation, it was just lunch. And I understand that they want to do, you know, other things, so I think that that would be a positive step. But the question on the table right now is, are we budgeting more time for this program?
Well, it would be for the assistant position.
That's what I'm right here, our assistant,
Right, Jean
because
and
you're
I,
going up.
yeah, and Jean and I talked about something too, and she brought up a point that, quite honestly, I hadn't even thought of. The position, adding 4 hours to that position, to me seemed an easier way to kind of handle it, like a straightforward, because the position already existed. But because that position is tied directly to social services, and that position answers to the director, Jean had brought up, there was some concern about the fact that then another department would answer to her about coordinating activities. I don't know how that,
Right,
Yeah.
the social services assistant is reporting to the social services director.
Got it.
For, municipal
Operations.
agent for the elderly
Over
stuff.
there.
But then is answering to Park and Rec's director for the recreational.
No, that's not how I would look at it.
okay,
Yeah.
that's.
I look at it,
That's
everything
where
would be
we-
reported to you.
Yeah, because originally that's where my brain was going.
I think we just have to have a
that, you know,
hard
they would be-
discussion.
So I was cutting that in, for those, whatever hours they would be over there, in my head, I was cutting them loose from social services, but I can't do that because of the way the position is set up.
And
So,
you can't answer them,
no,
you can't report to two different, it just doesn't
It
make
just,
sense.
I think Park and Recreation, and you all have to decide if Park and Recreation's gonna get out of the adult, the senior
Right.
business.
mhm,
And if that makes sense, which it seems logically to me, having been on Park and Rec for years, it seems a logical step back, because Park and Recreation conceptually is parks that people actually physically go to and recreating in those parks. Typically. And so getting back to that, I don't
And I
know,
think things change over time,
They do.
there's no, you know,
no constant.
right? And if we think that it's gonna be, you know, status quo forever, we're fooling ourselves.
And if Park and Rec decides to take a trip somewhere, and someone from the seniors say, hey, there are a few people who are A, willing and B, capable of getting on a bus and driving for an hour and a half to wherever, then great, that's a good thing.
mhm.
All right, so again, the question on the table, that we have to, we're just taking all this information, and then we have to monkey it around, but I think what would be helpful for me, and I think that you as well, is just to have that consensus, if indeed we have a consensus. If not, we're gonna have to make some changes here.
Yeah, I think we have a consensus.
Yeah?
Are we in agreement
Mhm.
that?
That you go talk to Park and Rec and see if we can get everything in there. Okay?
Brainstorm with-
And what they're willing to give up to do that.
Mhm.
I mean, if we're taking a big huge burden off of,
How many hours a week do we know are over there? Does anyone know? Do you know how many hours over that they,
Park and
Just
Rec
for-
or for the seniors?
Park and Rec spends at for the seniors over there?
You know, I mean,
Does anyone know?
yeah,
I mean, that would just, because if it's 2 hours, well, we're only paying for 2 new hours in effect.
mhm.
Doesn't mean to say we're cutting Park and Rec,
Right,
it
no.
just simply says when you do the ledger switch, responsibility-wise, there has to be an argument on Park and Rec side as to, okay, when you take something away from me, why do we
That
need
was
it
my
more?
point.
But, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, do you want to? Let's just spend a minute sort of talking about how do we wanna proceed with, first, the operational budget as far as cutting. Do we wanna sit, do we have time constraints, Ben?
nope,
Okay. Do we wanna sit and do some slogging?
Before you do that, you have 2 new requests on the
Oh, I'm
table
sorry.
that you
Yes.
haven't addressed yet,
regional
So-
hospice
just
and,
to chat about.
Regional hospice, they dropped this off, I don't know, a couple weeks ago.
Regional hospice. Oh, fish.
new request.
I'm sorry, I'm reading right now.
Right.
Says new is
The
opposed
first
to
one
an
is
regional
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 hospice.
hospice.
It's a organization the town has never given a grant to,
Never,
so it's a
okay.
new request. The regional hospice has never requested before. Fish of Torrey, what do they call themselves?
Fish.
Fish, they have
It used
requested,
to.
but we have not granted a grant.
So let's do fish first, and maybe Joyce, you can help us with the
Well,
historical.
can I back up?
Yep.
These do not fall into the program that we've set up, the policy, the process that we set up when we send out grant requests.
Wait, but if they've never submitted to us, they wouldn't fall under that process,
So we
so
write them a letter
they're,
and say, next year, there's a deadline of X to be able to put it in.
if that's how you wanna handle it, that's fine.
You know, while I understand they're coming in and saying, hey,
Okay.
look, let's go to Kent, let's go to drop a thing in, we have our own internal processes, how we process some things. And I think, personally, I think we just need to get tighter and tighter on this. Which leads me just back to all the budget presentations. We've gotten handwritten ones, we've gotten none, we've got chicken scratch, we've gotten junk, we've gotten just people talking. And I think that that's just, you know, who would entertain anything like that in any world where you're asking for money? No business. So
And it's
I
not
think we just
efficient,
need to,
it's not
it has nothing to do with, you know, saying somebody is this or that. I think we just need to have a process. This does not fit into my process. And going back to in fairness to the fire department who came in a day late because their printer was broken, why should I give money to Regional Hospice of Danbury when they haven't even done the process? That's my thought.
That's logical. My only, question is, they don't know what they don't know, so they don't know.
Dear Regional Hospice, we
I
are on a
understand.
cycle of
Easily
this.
write the
Next
letter,
year, we would
but-
love to consider that.
But there's nothing anywhere publicly that says we accept grant applications for, you know, consideration in our operating budget on this day, here are the forms, here's the webpage that it all goes to.
Agreed. Bad on us. But, you know, there are plenty of, you know, you apply for a college, you know, some are rolling, some aren't. I'm just getting back to, I would like to have a system, and I don't wanna be at budget time trying to squeeze in $5,000 for some hospice,
Yeah, I don't
which
disagree.
is probably worth it, or, but, Ed?
My question, do we already give to a different hospice?
No.
We don't give any money to any hospice group?
Not
Well, we
this.
used to, not hospice, we gave to visiting nurses.
Yeah, okay.
But that's not hospice, that's
No,
different.
Okay. So,
So.
It was the Kent Nursing Association, but they have
Kent,
since,
thank you.
but they have merged with the
Right.
community fund, so they no longer needed the town's
Right.
assistance.
So we'll write them a letter, and I think we also need to talk about how to make the entire process
Right.
transparent and available to
Yeah.
anybody.
I think that
And
makes
it
sense.
it may mean that we have a pile
Yeah.
at budget season, but then
But
it'll
then we
be
have a pile.
standardized and it'll all come in at the same time.
And they need to come in and sit down and talk to us about, I mean, we don't even know who regional hospice is, I don't, so,
That's fair.
all right,
So
so now, back to your general question.
what is, what's the process that has been taken in past years? Do we,
Historically, the selectmen have gone back individually, gone over it individually, made notes and brought back and discussed it, line by line.
did they also do a percentage raise that way? Cause back when
Yep.
I was a selectman, we voted in the beginning of the budget season an hourly increase that each department head should consider.
Mhm. My experience in the past is the first selectman had said to departments, a couple of things, what they expected from the budget, one, in terms of we're growing or not growing, and two, given them a number of, for increase, and typically it's fallen on that 3% line. Would that be accurate, Joyce?
Somewhat, yeah.
The first part, certainly? No.
No, the second part.
So the first part, Bruce never really, well, remember he'd write that letter every year. that was-
You all wrote that letter,
Yeah,
that
Bruce
wasn't
wrote-
just from Bruce, but
Well,
yes.
Bruce wrote the letter
Conceptually,
and then said he gave it to everybody.
right, conceptually, the Board of Selectmen sent out a cover letter that said, you know, obviously, we'd like your budgets to stay as low as possible, you know, but give a average
overall
salary increase.
But that went on for how many years, would you say?
That's mostly my whole career here.
Okay,
so.
and where that got this board in trouble was where we had to do the hard slogging work of going through a management review. As ugly as it was,
Right.
we had to do it because there was such inequity by saying every year was so tight, every year was so tight.
Yeah.
And every department responded by saying, okay, I'll wait for my raise. Well, then there were examples of people who waited 10 years to be, you know, equalized with, so one, we don't wanna get there. Two, we haven't said to the groups, you know,
No.
we haven't given them a letter, which is fine, I think is actually good. And so really the next step would be to just rip through it ourselves and then come back and do the hard scratching.
So do you guys feel like you wanna do that as a group today, or do we wanna take the rest of this week, we'll do a special meeting midweek next week, and all come back prepared to,
You already have one meeting next week for the sewer
so
ordinances.
we could do it
We could piggyback.
then.
That's-
What
Just to
day is
give
that?
us the weekend to really dig in and,
I think it got moved to Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Isn't that what I
Ed?
think? Yeah, Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Will you be?
Yeah,
That's, so that's going to be.
But will you
March
have ample time
3rd?
after that? You don't have.
my only question was on this, some of these people included their increases in
I
there.
think the new one that Barbara just sent, I think it's a 3% across the board unless somebody requested, except for the last two that just
So
came
those
today.
are not in there, they're
So-
taken out and redone to the 3.
The last two, right, because we didn't have their information till
So
this
we need
morning.
to decide if we're doing the 3 or if we're
Right.
doing the 2.25 like
Good
the
question.
highway crew union, I believe that's what their percentage is this year.
Good.
I'm not, don't hold me to that number, but I
No,
believe
no.
that was quoted once.
I think I saw that as well, that the highway department.
I think I wrote it down,
2.2 something.
2.25 or
and
something.
Barbara can give us
Yep,
the scenarios
2.25.
for
So
whatever.
insurance wise, let's start with the easiest one. Insurance, is that,
Mhm.
it says 9% increase, does that look accurate?
Mhm.
Okay, so that at least gives us some comfort, because some years it was 18%
Right.
and
And
I
that's
think
across the board
24%.
Yes,
Yeah.
for each person under insurance now.
correct.
And can you give us reason and rationale as to why it seems so reasonable and so early this year?
Because I have been working with our broker, and we are now a much smaller group. If you
Yeah.
recall, last year, a
Yeah.
lot of people spun off. So we're a smaller group, so our experience, knock on wood, reflects a lower increase. She did just mention that maybe another group may be coming back to us that had peeled off, but she doesn't have all the information yet. And that could skew our numbers a little bit, hopefully better and not
Yeah.
worse. But I did ask and told her that we are in budget and how solid is that 9%. Unfortunately, because we're so new, there's only a short period of experience to base the increase on. So they will reevaluate it again like in May. So even after we approve the budget, there could be hopefully a decrease if that's the case. But there's no guarantees, especially if this other group comes back on. They may say, fine, we'll lock in at the 9% and leave it there. So 9 is as solid as I can give you at this point.
And how many are in our pool?
Just 50, if you recall, we
Yeah, I
had
think
to,
that's- okay.
we had to have the opt-out people sign applications to
Right.
count as participants to get
Gotcha.
in that.
Gotcha, thank you.
And the contribution from employees is
Which employee?
full-time employees,
Highway or town hall?
town hall,
10%.
10% they pay out.
And only full-time employees
No, right, correct.
get them.
Right.
So,
All right, so that makes me, that's good, we have that. And if you wanna talk about the increase?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should discuss it at some point, because that way,
Well, then we can get the numbers fixed.
exactly,
If we change it.
until we decide that, we kind of are in limbo.
So, again, let me historically, and Joyce, please correct me if you think it's inaccurate, but I believe historically the 3% has been the gauge in which to say to people, oh, we'll give you a raise, and so over time that 3%, increase. As I said, I think it got us into trouble, and the real impetus for providing an increase at a percentage is based to thwart, if you will, inflation or cost of living. That's really what it's been argued, is the cost of living. But it's sort of morphed into a raise, and I think that we need to bring it back over the line and say, it's not a raise. It's a hedge against going forward. There is the argument, which I have made, which is there are plenty of people who don't get even that.
I agree.
They don't get a raise.
Right.
They don't get a cost of living. It seems that unions seem to somehow get that every year. It seems that there are groups, and that has been the argument from some people in departments and town halls and saying, look at other places that are getting it here within this mechanism, specifically the teachers, specifically the town hall, town crew. I know, and I've spoken to 2 other municipalities recently, and they just do 3%. They don't care, they just do 3%, and it makes their life easier, and that's what they do. So, my personal opinion is, I get the, hedging against inflation, and I think our people all do very good jobs. I just have a problem with the 3%. I think that we should be closer to the rate of inflation, or the COLA, and even that, they have trouble.
Right.
They have trouble with it because the cost of living, so that obviously encompasses, buying a refrigerator and durable goods and things like that. But a refrigerator that you bought one time, 10 years ago, is not as efficient, or is more efficient than it was theoretically. So you can kick around the numbers, but my sense is I'd like to see it closer to that, meaning rate of inflation.
And do we have that number?
I do not know.
I don't either.
If I were to guess, it's probably 2.25 or something like that.
That might be high,
2.5,
actually,
maybe 9.
for what they state.
While he's Googling that, Ed, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, when you look at it, but we also have to consider that we have to decide on the other 2 people that came in looking for more money back into their budgets. That's above whatever we decide here.
Just for the salary, there were 3.
And what I brought up many years ago as a selectman was that 3% is a big different number from somebody that's making $50,000 to somebody that's making $25,000 and full considered full-time.
Mm-hmm.
So I had suggested maybe doing an hourly increase rather than a percentage, and I got jumped all over about you can't do that. It makes too much of a difference, and that's where I think we fell far behind, because 3% on the $50,000 person
Big jump.
is a big jump compared to the $29,000 a year person.
Mm-hmm.
So do we wanna have Barbara run it at 2.25 and 3%, and then we can actually
Sure.
look at,
Well, it was inflation, I think it says in 2019 was 1.76.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. They're always like a point below.
And the CPI is 2.3%.
Yep.
Maybe somewhere in the middle, 2%.
we can have her do both of those.
Sure.
And then get it back to us, she'll be in, what's today?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I mean, people talk about the state of Connecticut employees, we just went 3 years without an increase. They froze our increase at 0, and our insurance went up about 14% cost, out-of-pocket cost. Mhm.
What do you mean they froze you didn't give anyone any raises?
And you, well, for the Department of Transportation anyway, no
Yeah,
raises,
raises.
0. We finally got our first raise in 3 years,
They
which
didn't even
was
give you a cost of living?
nothing.
No, yeah,
Which was 2.5% this year, but our insurance went up between 12 and 14% over the 3 years.
So you got, okay.
so, yeah, I think Barbara,
She can do it.
yeah, she can do
Yeah,
it
that would help.
tonight, and then it'll give us plenty of time the rest of the week and the weekend to each come back with sharpening this up.
And all in all, and I'll say historically, and I've said it before, all the departments they're right at the bone for the most part.
Mhm.
Mhm.
every department has, I think, over the last 10 years, just really looked hard at their numbers, really done this. So I think, you know, the thing I grapple with is that it's the salaries and the insurance that really take off. And the salaries are not really out of control. We've done a good job, I think. It's just, you know, these costs just keep piling up, and it's not in supplies, it's not in any of the things that, I mean, everybody's done. Listen to Susie, she's recycling stuff, which we all would do anyway, but that's in the front of her mind for the taxpayer.
And she's
And
a
all of the
taxpayer.
departments seem to be
Right.
of that mindset, I think. And I think that we don't give them enough credit, and I think we really should give them, you know, at least speak publicly that I feel that we've done it year in and year out,
Yeah, and
all departments.
I see
Yep.
it day to day in the building where there's, you know, just office supplies,
Yeah,
we don't have, you know, nobody's got,
yeah, tons of stuff stored.
yeah, Barbara, when we were sitting in a grant meeting the other day, she printed out something for the 3 or 4 of us to look at, and she actually
Had the other side.
uses scrap paper,
sure.
yeah, she
Mhm.
takes the, you know, her off prints and puts them back into a pile for using the other side. So, yeah, I don't think there's anybody in the building who doesn't have that forefront in their mind.
Yeah, and so, and that's why my line of questioning for many of these departments is what in the future are we doing that's going to make your job faster and more efficient? Doesn't mean that we're eliminating your position, doesn't mean that we're cutting your hours, but what can make it faster and more efficient so that we can, you know, try to keep these budget lines as tight as possible when we're talking about salary increases and such.
And also figure out the park and rec and social services person. That's gonna be.
So does that make sense for this, as far as homework plan?
Mm-hmm.
And Barbara will do that, she'll be updating that today.
Yeah.
Barbara, if you're watching.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense.
Capital.
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 Has this been kicked back to us by Board of Finance?
No, but, and did they talk about it? Or they did?
According to the minutes, they said that the selectmen didn't do an official presentation to the Board of Finance yet.
That just occurred to me, I did, 2 months ago.
I thought you had presented it to them, but,
I read the minutes too, it was kind of odd.
so I'm not sure what their status is, but I put it on our agenda because it's time to make a decision.
When is
So-
their next meeting? I'm sure it's on the
They just
calendar.
have one.
Third Tuesday of
Yeah.
the month, so,
I think they just had one,
yeah, they
correct?
did, yep, they just had one.
I'll touch
Last week.
base with Mark Sabetic. Cause I was 2 or 3 up that night for meetings, so, I just gave my report and then had to leave, so I wasn't there for the end, the second half of the meeting.
Yeah, Board of Finance is St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sabetic, he's not Irish. He could be. Well, I don't know if, you know, I know what they're gonna say. They don't wanna see this number.
Mhm.
And they're thinking that we haven't done our job by cutting it for them. And, you know, I mean, our big expenditures coming in are roads,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Roads and bridges.
Yep.
I mean, literally.
Yeah.
We got 20,000, 50,000, and we've got over $1 million, over $1 million in bridges and roads.
With no engineered plans or anything yet, some of them. So we don't even have a real cost.
Right, but who, is there an engineer that'll,
Not 5 years.
No,
Right.
no, that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
Now, this is based on Rick's experience
Right.
and,
That's what I mean, right,
you know, but to Ed's point, 5 years from now, the number could be bigger.
Right.
yep,
No, that number,
it never goes
although,
down.
although I believe Rick has built some of that in, knowing that
Mhm.
over time, you know,
Right.
there's cost growth there, but again, you just don't know. And if the Board of Finance is having a tough time swallowing that, all they have to do is look to the right side of the dark
Right.
line and see what's coming.
Exactly.
Because we have some real infrastructure issues that we have to address.
Yeah, there's no,
And while these guys may not like it, maybe, you know, they gotta figure out a different way. Maybe they wanna figure out how to bond these and we can get some of these taken care of sooner than later.
And the state might be cutting matching numbers in the future, more than willing to help
Really,
fund some of it. Well,
you could see
it
that.
doesn't look good.
No, just
yeah,
release the
there's a
transportation.
little, there's like a 2-year.
In
sort
what?
of In the, between roads and bridges.
Roads and bridges.
22, 23, 24,
Yeah.
there's sort of a little bit of a lull. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they would consider bonding for Bridge 16, you know, Anderson Acres.
For 23, 24,
Yeah,
you know,
I don't know.
that's
if
their
it's
department.
possible. Right.
But the way I look at it, in just reading this, is there's $1 million worth of this capital plan that is infrastructure that we have to pay.
Eventually.
It's not right.
And you cannot
Correct.
put off a
Correct.
bridge.
Which we've done 20 years ago when we had about
Right.
22 bridges we had to do.
And I think
Okay,
we also
park,
need to be careful about, like Botsford Road was pushed out, right? Was pushed
Mhm.
out a year.
Yes, it was.
And in hindsight, that might have been a mistake, because now it's stacked
Mhm.
up this, you know, it's
So, Gene,
it's
maybe
made
you
really
and,
heavy that,
maybe you and Rick can sit down, put together all of the road bridge construction, if you will, and really see, you know, present that number to the Board of Finance, take it completely out of roofs and parking lots and, you know, the niggly things, because if we're gonna spend $3 million or whatever the number is for sidewalks, how the heck do they think we're gonna get by without bridges and roads? I mean, I don't get it. So they're gonna have to bite the bullet maybe and say, we need a bigger infrastructure program here outside of the capital plan, you know? Much like we just talked about to the fire department. Give us your big stuff, you deal with your little stuff. Well, unfortunately, $20, $50, $175,000 is little stuff now compared to the
Sure.
millions that you're talking about to do, you know, the work under Rick.
okay,
And if they don't wanna do that, let them cut them.
That's, yep.
Let them make the decision.
yeah. And I did, you know, now thinking back on that, I did go down the meeting.
You went to the meeting and showed it.
2 meetings ago, right? It was
Yeah.
2 meetings ago. And
I think it was
said,
on your report,
"We're gonna
too."
give this off to you, so.
We gave it to them so that we could present it at the town meeting,
Yeah.
and so they had it. And
In
then
fairness,
you presented it at that point.
in fairness to them, having sat on that board, when you see that number, you go, "Ooh." And then the first reaction is, nobody's done their homework. So I think what we have to do is really show them where we have done our homework and we just have to face some hard realities. And I think once they see that we're facing hard realities, they'll get it. And maybe, like you said, listen, maybe we can fast track that, if we can bond it, cheap money, bond it, get these bridges done, get Botsford Road done sooner, get ahead of the game. Which speaks to a larger program. I asked Rick this, and I know he's gonna, he doesn't like it, but I think we need to have a real list of roads, bridges, and everything that are on our list to come. It's not saying that we recognize they're a problem and that we're exposing ourselves to anything. It simply is a priority list of where we want and what we want to have taken care of over time.
That was
Because
done many years ago.
under Lori, it was done, and it was
We had a
excellent.
whole,
We had a
yeah,
whole list, and we knew when it was coming,
of
and it
life
cycled
span.
around, and what it did is it told, you know, if you were on one road and you wanna run another, I know, like, okay, I know my road's fourth in line, and it's gonna be done potentially done X, Y, this date. And it was, the department was excellent at the time, because oftentimes what they would do is like, oh, we saved money from this other one, so we can
Yep.
jumpstart this
Yep.
one now. So there was really good creative thought process behind it. But moreover, the public was informed as to where and what we were doing, and not just from this capital plan where maybe a third of the people look at it.
Or maybe we'll do it, or maybe we won't, like Botsford Road, and then push it off a year, and the people think, no.
And it's not like relevant when you're looking at it in
Right.
rows and columns with the roof
Right.
and carpet and
Right.
painting.
Mhm.
Okay. So the last,
Policy.
so as we talked about at the last meeting, the policy procedure manual needs
Oh, yeah.
a revisit. And one of the things actually that's related to the CMPG, I think that's what it's called, the block grant for for KAH, is that there has to be a drug and alcohol policy, which apparently we don't have, which I thought was very,
Only alcohol, sorry. Oh, I thought we were supposed to.
You're on tape now.
I thought we were supposed to avow. Well, Ira knows that.
You're on tape now.
so, and that's something that CIRMA/CCM can get us a boilerplate for. But what my plan is, and I think it's gonna take multiple months to go through the policy and procedure manual, and I'd like to compare it to, I don't know if it's ever been compared to, like CCM recommendations, which are based on, national standards. Has that ever been?
No, but can I ask a question before you? Is it the Board of Selectmen's desire to have the employee manual somewhat match the highway contract and the elected officials contract, or the elected officials policy and procedure manual as well? You have 3 documents. Is it your goal for them to be similar?
Well, I don't know.
Because
Was
quite
there
often
a
you-
reason why they were separate?
Well, obviously, the union contract was written by the union, and it's
Yeah.
dedicated. Ours was written by multiple facets of people and reviewed multiple times. The elected official one was created, never anything done with it.
Was that done by George?
Back in, I think maybe your wife, back when your wife
George and-
redid them,
yeah,
and
George and
Karen
Karen,
and
yeah,
that,
yeah.
but nothing ever happened with it. So I have 3 documents in front of me.
I think it absolutely makes sense to get to a one document.
Well, there are certainly, I don't know the merits of all of them, but I would imagine that there are some that are germane to, some, but all, drug and alcohol policies are gonna be umbrellas. So,
Well, the highway department has a drug and alcohol policy.
I gotta get this going.
yeah.
But-
Litchfield County, isn't it?
So I don't know the answer to that. My instincts would say, yes, that makes sense. But honestly, I'm not
And
gonna.
you have set precedents where you have said, we're gonna do this because the union contract has it,
Right,
but not all things. So you need to be a little bit more consistent.
right, but there's a hiring policy that we sort of started,
Yeah.
that was in the policy, but then
Yeah.
have sort of followed all along the line the last number of hires that has no relationship to somebody who's been elected in,
I understand that, but
right?
can I give you an example?
Yeah, please.
An example would be the health insurance.
Yeah.
Now, Ed very nicely asked me, what are the when I said, what employees?
Yeah.
He said town hall. I gave him an answer. The highway guys pay a completely different level
Okay, I'm
than what we
thinking-
pay.
Mhm.
They pay
Okay,
4%
okay.
for single and then 11% above that. So as an example.
Yes, just, yeah, okay. Just give me your number in case I lose.
I want
it.
Ed to hear this, so I'm gonna pause for a
ahead.
second, because this is interesting.
Okay, all right, thank you, Glenn. I might have to go.
Okay.
I'll stay for a few more minutes.
Okay, so Ed, I was telling him the difference between some of these policies, and that one of the examples is health insurance. You asked me
Right.
what the town hall employees pay, it's 10%.
Right,
The highway guys pay 4 and 11%.
Right.
So for a single person on the highway, they pay $10.61 a week, $551.67 a year. A town hall employee pays $26.52 a week, almost double. Nothing has ever been addressed as to bringing that any closer together, any further apart. Pension is another perfect example. I use a non-CDL driver. They get $6,635 a year because it's based on a flat dollar amount. I, who make $51,000 a year, it's public knowledge, I get $2,500 a year. There's a $4,000 discrepancy between the two. So we're getting less in pension, we're paying more in health insurance, and there's multiple, I can go through those manuals and
So-
show you multiple differences.
Point well taken.
Alignment.
Honestly, I think that you can take the lead in figuring out whether you need, that a group can do it. I don't think it's something that one person can do. It seems to be, it's heavy lifting. But I think that it does make some sense to have a real one policy manual. But you're gonna have to be able to take in consideration the nuances that are involved in that.
Right, different categories.
So I think
But
the first thing to do is to find the compass and and compare and contrast the three so that decision-making can happen as to where to align them to get to one. And the one manual may have union employees, non-union, it may have
Elected.
nuances for you, those true
Right.
differences. But I think having 3 different documents.
And I would recommend, if everyone's still in town or alive or even willing, to take the people who authored those, obviously the contract is a contract. It's a legal, it's a contract, so that was done by attorneys. But the other 2 documents, to see what were the genesis and the rationale and reasons for doing it, and maybe lean on those people to see how we can synthesize it. I mean, I hear Joyce's point, makes sense, and there has been discrepancies and unevenness, and that's why people have said, well, look at what's happening there, here, and they keep pointing fingers, so.
Right.
But that's way out of, that's a project.
Right.
It's not something that, I mean, it's a project, so, and I don't know.
For the policy, or do you mean the discrepancy?
No, the policy to put the
Right,
manual,
the manual itself.
put the manual back together if one's so inclined. And I don't wanna muddy it with the budget unless there's any budgetary impact.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I would respectfully request, since you're going in the theory that you would like them to be cohesive, and a word that was used by the selectmen before was conforming, I'm asking that you amend a motion that was made to cap the town hall employees' insurance opt-out at $15,000. I just showed you 2 examples where the highway guys had a reason to negotiate that. Town hall didn't. So I'm asking that you remove that motion, the way you capped it, and go back to the 50%. I could go on.
And what was the
So,
50%?
you familiar with what?
So, yeah, I'm not.
Not really, but I do understand one thing. I understand why the town crew went the way they went, because there were a lot of employees at that time making less than what some of the town hall employees were making. So,
And now they're making a lot.
so the town crew went union.
And I don't disagree that, but
And that's when we had many arguments and, you know, as a selectman at the time, over, because right away when they went union, then all of a sudden the town hall people wanted to go union. And then there was kind of a big argument with that, we had back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So,
are you saying the town hall employees should go union?
I'm not saying they should, but that would be their decision, not ours. You know what I'm saying? And it was kind of a threat factor more than a, because-
I'm just asking, I'm not
because,
threatening.
right, no, I'm saying that was,
Right,
I was in the middle of all this when the town crew went union.
right.
I mean, they weren't getting overtime. If you were out sick for a day and you came in and you worked all night, you had to work the 40 hours straight time to make you 40 hours, which would also could happen here too.
Right.
So there was a lot of,
Well, I think the
So,
I think the direction, I'm not prepared to even accept the
Right.
fact that all three are gonna get under it, but if there's a recommendation from a group of people that say they've looked at it and they've reviewed it and it makes sense, I'm willing to listen to it. That is, the question is the question that Joyce brings up is has a budgetary impact, which goes back to the policy, correct?
Correct.
All right, so I'm not prepared to change the policy right now. So as to the request, I would say no.
Are you gonna look at pension then for town hall employees? It's been asked before, and I just showed you a perfect example. I mean,
Well, I understand that, I just, there's nothing in the budget that's presented in front of us that is requesting that, is there?
I'm making it now,
Okay,
if that's what you're looking for.
yeah.
So I'd like to get from Barbara what that,
Well,
the complete picture of what that looks like now and what it could look like with your.
Well, it's here, right? What is the pension, it's like a
5% right now.
5%,
Yeah.
and so the request is what?
10%.
10%, and what does the town crew get, 10%? No,
No,
they
they get a dollar amount.
Okay.
But, I mean, we can look at the town clerk's salary is closer, it's only $600 different than the non-CDL driver. And the non-CDL driver gets $6,635, and the town clerk gets $3,835. So it's almost 50% less that the town hall employees get. So I'm asking
So-
for 10% across the board for
So,
pension.
I go back to my original point that, I hear you, thank you.
Mhm.
I go back to my original point that all the departments have done a great job at whittling and working their budgets down to, and keeping them great. The one thing that keeps growing is salaries and compensation.
Yep.
And I'm not making, to be clear, I'm not trying to castigate anyone or put anybody in a position such that they deserve or don't deserve. I think the point's well taken that there's been discrepancy. I don't think I'm the one that's gonna make the decision, should make the decision, or the three of us. I think a group of people who really know policy, understand how to write policy, understand whether it's fair or not fair, who would put it together and say, this is what goes on in normal course, this is what the selectmen should consider. That I would listen to.
How do you see that, where do you see that group?
Well, take for an example, there's gotta be 3 towns around us that have policy manuals. Do they have 3 of them? Do they have 2 of them? Do they have 1 of them? Do they have none of them? And if so, what is the reason and rationale? If there's a professional policy group, which I'm sure there is, because it's a professional, it's not for everybody.
The BCC.
Good, if they have they say, no, Kent, your logic's warped that you have 3 and that you're paying one person this and that, let's hear it. And let's hear what those guidelines are, let's hear what those, because as far as I understand, I believe Karen and Darlene and maybe George Jacobson were involved in one of those policy manual developments. Like, they must have relied on some data, and there must have been a rationale as to why it was just that versus this, and
I just wanna make sure
does that make, and I don't feel comfortable writing it myself, or saying this is, I don't mind giving overall policies that I would agree with or disagree with, but as far as creating them and understanding them, it's just not in my purview.
But to use an old term, we're kind of kicking it down the road again. This is another year that there will be this discrepancy.
Right, which is, well, I get it, and I
And
get
I'm
it.
sorry, I'm speaking for a whole group that
No, I get
really.
it, and I get it because this has been kicked down,
you're
but,
I agree, because excuse me, I'm sorry. I remember even at some point, a member actually of one of the groups saying, you can always look for another job if you're not happy with what you're making and I remember that coming out, and it hit, back to when the town crew went to the union.
Right.
Now, then all of a sudden, they were making more, and all the town hall people were upset that they got one more holiday or whatever, and unfortunately, it was tough here, but it wasn't tough when they were making more money and getting more benefits and the day off on election day when they were off and they were working.
Mhm.
So, I think, as Chris said, I think it needs to be a group that's gonna have to decide this. But you have to remember, the townspeople might say, then I will I've heard it before in the past. If you don't like your job, you don't know how much you're making, go look somewhere else.
Well,
And I'm not saying that because you brought this up, I'm just saying I've heard people say that, unfortunately. And that's not what you want, because the town hall is running very well and being very efficient. But I hate the two groups being compared to each other because
Well, it seems they get
It's-
compared when
because
it's
they
benefits.
took care of their interests doesn't mean you, right, that's what I'm saying.
well, look, the teachers have always considered themselves different.
Mhm.
They always have.
Yep.
And town crews split off and they consider themselves different.
Mhm.
So the real question is, are they?
Right.
And we have to decide, this group,
Right.
if we feel that they should be treated differently or not. Just because they negotiate better than these individuals who are coming through, or, you know, the teachers, the Board of Education comes to us and say, oh, well, this is what we negotiated here. So the challenge you get into, however, is if indeed a union or a teachers' union decides that this is what to do, then we have to make the adjustment here. And is that compensation right and fair? I don't know. I don't honestly know. I would like to have some sort of professional outside perspective, like we did with the management review, albeit not perfect, but at least somebody who went out and said, look at all these are the standard trends, these are the process, this is what happens. And if the answer is, yeah, we look at all employees the same across the board in the municipality, well, maybe we have to do that. But I'm not prepared today to change
Me
this
neither.
budget
Right.
to reflect anything potentially of change in a policy without looking at it with the whole. And in fairness to Joyce's point, the town hall has been asking for this for a long time, so I think we put this on the fast track and really look at this and make sure that we are not failing in any way. And then if we have to, and it doesn't meet budget deadline by this one, we really have to make sure that it's tight and fair going into the next one.
I agree.
I'm sorry, so are you attempting to get it resolved in this budget season? Is that what you just said?
Yes, Jean, do you think you can? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we can get it and it makes, if there's some glaring error, I think it's beholding on us to look hard at that.
It's a glaring error.
But I also think that we need to get a group of people or, you know, get some help rather than just Jean sits down and
Right,
opens up
goes
thing
down
and says,
that
hey,
hole.
look,
Right.
because one, you don't have history and, you know, I think just the process wise.
And going and seeking help from the COG and CCM, they have the standard.
They have standards.
Especially.
But I also we don't wanna have lost history. Why and what and how did this come about?
And then to be fair to a conversation that was brought up earlier, I don't know how the Board of Selectmen feels about prorated pension and benefits and time off for part-time people.
Elaborate that, please.
So I work 30 hours a week and I get this package.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who works 15 hours a week gets half of what I get.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so they would get paid time off and they would get an opportunity to have some pension or health benefits, I mean, at a different rate, whatever.
So
I mean,
you-
look at the whole package.
So.
I mean, most of our part-time people are not your typical 5 or 10 hours a week. Most of them are pretty close to, you know, being full-time. I mean, there's not a huge discrepancy in the number of hours they work. So if you gave them something as opposed to nothing, it would close that gap in total compensation, which is not a term I'm really, it's not apples to apples. So, but it's also an opportunity to look at that and find out what your appetite is for that proposal, so that then there wouldn't have that, or they wouldn't feel, perhaps.
But, you know, I mean, it's really hard to say that when somebody who's full-time is doing 30 hours on the books, but they're actually doing 40 hours, and somebody who's part-time, because of the position, being the position, doing 15 hours and maybe doing 16 hours.
But-
That's where I see the difference.
But part-time people already are getting paid time off because they're salaried and they're taking time off. So you're already doing it without any official rules around it.
Well, I would agree with you that it seems to me that it's all over the place. If there's a way to get it all under one, that would be wonderful. I just think we need to make sure that it's done carefully and properly and with real thought. So that when I'm looking at it, which is what I will be doing with Ed and you, there's a real rationale that I can understand and know that lots of different minds went into that. Because clearly the highway department, there's only one or two minds that went into that, 2 attorneys. You know, getting people's advice as to what they think and want.
But for this, so just for clarification, so with this subgroup, you'd like to see them kind of be closer in.
I'm not saying that.
Okay, well, they need a direction to go, and if Jean brings these group of people together,
Right?
I mean, I can go through, there isn't a page in this document that I haven't myself just gone through and put things, because there's things that are duplications, there's things that are inconsistent, there's a lot of things that aren't addressed.
I don't think the board needs to give an opinion yet. I think we're one step too early. I think what's gonna happen when we do a comparison of the 3 documents, there's gonna be stuff that like jumps off the page.
Mhm.
And then I think that's gonna be the sort of the bolus of, I think that's gonna start to guide our group to suggest to the board, here's some major holes or major, completely different, and here's the standard that's recommended by CCM. So I think it's early to ask what the board's opinion is. I think
Okay.
they need, I think we can do that first level and come back with a, like, here's what's completely missing, here's what's aligned, and
Okay.
then they have to start the decision making from there. Does that make sense?
That's the only way I think I could understand it.
And I think if we're wanting some sort of starting point, it's fair, equitable, common sense, logical, or not a bad.
When
place
Barbara
to
does
start
the
from.
2.5% salary, would you like her also to do the 10% pension? Just so you have a number, so that you know what you're looking at?
As well. There's no reason not to. If it's in.
I mean, if you're gonna try to fast track it, that way you haven't, I mean, just so that you have some information.
Well, I wanna slow you down. I'm not
Okay.
trying to fast track it. I hear you.
Well-
I hear you that says that you totally feel, and I get it,
Right.
that you feel, and not just you who you are speaking for many, feel that there's this discrepancy. I'm not prepared to say right now that we're gonna make that adjustment in this year's budget. Now, if this does come out that, let's go down the road. We come down into April and you say, hey, look, this is something that the group, and we've been able to do this, and this is fair, this is not fair, and me, and Ed decide that we wanna make a change, we've gotta make an argument to the taxpayers to why we've done that.
Right. Well, I've gotta go.
Yep.
I have a dire emergency.
Well, okay,
It's not an emergency, but it's an emergency in an elderly woman's eyes.
okay.
I'm gonna go straighten it out, or
Alright.
look at it anyway,
There you
because
go.
we're about done, is that
I
correct?
I just wanted to say that we put the RFPQ, we're putting it out to bid on Friday,
Okay.
and that our mission statement will be ready before the board's,
Park and Rec.
Yep.
and then the board, mission statement will be ready by April for you guys to review.
Okay.
That's about it for now.
Awesome,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
You need a hand in it, or you're?
Yeah, if you wanna come with me, you can, I don't know what's.
What's your
turn
now
out,
11:20?
but-
So, 20:15?
Thank you.